What if I told you that the person who could change your life isn't sitting in a corporate boardroom or making big decisions at the top? What if it's someone who cleans your office at night, someone you never notice, someone the world has completely forgotten? This is the true story of a billionaire who lost it all, and the unexpected woman who saved him in seconds. A woman invisible to everyone around her. A man who thought his success could protect him from anything. And one life-altering moment that changed everything for both of them. Stay with me because by the end of this story, you'll understand why sometimes the greatest blessings come wrapped in the most unexpected packages. You might even realize that someone in your life is quietly waiting for you to finally see them. This isn't just a story about business. It's about second chances, unseen heroes, and a truth that will make you question everything you thought you knew about success. Before I take you back to the night when everything fell apart for Marcus Williams, a man who once had the world at his feet. But it all slipped away in a single moment. Hit the subscribe button. Marcus Williams had everything. A billion-dollar tech empire, a penthouse suite with floor-to-ceiling views of the city, and a team of executives who hung on his every word. For years, he had built his company, Horizon Innovations, from the ground up, always believing that the world was at his command. He sacrificed everything to get here. But on that fateful night, as he sat alone in his office, everything came crashing down. Marcus had always prided himself on his ability to control his destiny. He was the kind of man who could walk into a room and make decisions that would shift the course of entire industries. He had spent years building Horizon Innovations from the ground up, navigating the cutthroat world of tech with sharp instincts and an iron will. But on that night, as he sat alone in his sleek, empty office, his world felt nothing like the empire he had fought so hard to create. The city lights outside his window, once a symbol of everything he had worked for, now seemed like mocking reminders of his failure. His company was dying, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He slammed his fist against the desk, the sound echoing in the silence. He could feel the weight of his failures pressing down on him. The cyber attack had been a disaster, but it wasn't just that. It was everything. The bad investments, the blind trust in his closest partners, the blind spots he had allowed to form over the years. His entire business model was crumbling before his eyes. Desperation clawed at him. He wasn't used to this feeling. He had always been in control. But now, everything was slipping through his fingers, and no one could offer him the help he so desperately needed. The phone calls with his security team had been fruitless. No one had answers. His head of technology was unreachable. His financial advisors? Useless. They had been blindsided by the attack, just as he had been. Marcus's hands gripped the edges of his desk, the reality settling in like cold steel. Horizon Innovations, the company he had spent 12 years building, was on the brink of collapse, and none of his highly paid experts, could offer a solution. His head felt heavy, like it was full of cotton, and the room seemed to shrink around him. He felt small, not just in the context of the business world, but in life. The lights outside had long since lost their allure, and now they only seemed like distant stars, unreachable and indifferent. As he sat there, sinking deeper into his thoughts, the faintest sound broke through the silence, a soft click, followed by the squeak of wheels. His heart skipped a beat, and he looked up. At this hour, the building was empty. Everyone had gone home, leaving him alone with the wreckage of his life. Who could it possibly be? A woman appeared in the doorway, pushing a cleaning cart. Marcus's gaze landed on her, confusion clouding his mind. She was dressed in a simple gray uniform, her dark hair pulled back into a ponytail. Her name was Clara, or at least that's what he thought he'd overheard from someone in the hallway. He barely paid attention to the cleaning staff. Who did? They were just background noise, invisible to most, a necessity but not something you gave much thought to. Clara paused at the door when she saw him sitting there, hunched over in despair. Her expression shifted from surprise to concern. "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir," she said, her voice soft, almost apologetic. "I didn't realize anyone was still here. I can come back later." Marcus wiped his face with his hand, his frustration and exhaustion pouring through. He let out a bitter laugh. "You're not interrupting anything," he muttered. "Just me watching everything I've worked for go down in flames." Clara's gaze lingered on him for a moment longer than necessary. It wasn't sympathy. It was something else. Something Marcus couldn't quite name. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice quiet but genuine. Marcus shook his head, his chest tight. "No. My company's been attacked. Everything I've built is gone. So no, I'm not okay." He sighed deeply, rubbing his temples. "I doubt you care." "I do," she replied, her voice firm. Clara glanced around the room, her eyes quickly scanning the monitors that were flashing error messages. She didn't flinch at the sight of the chaos. Instead, she studied the patterns on the screen, her brow furrowing as if trying to make sense of it. "Looks like a cyber attack," she said softly. "A pretty serious one." Marcus blinked in surprise. He had been staring at those screens for hours, but it hadn't even crossed his mind that someone inside the system could be behind it. For the first time that night, a flicker of hope stirred within him. "How do you know that?" he asked, almost disbelieving. Clara stepped into the room without waiting for an invitation, her gaze never leaving the screen. "I used to do this kind of work. I was a financial analyst before life happened." Marcus stood up, his curiosity piqued. He wasn't sure why he was suddenly listening to this woman, this stranger who cleaned his office, but there was something in her tone that commanded his attention. His mind raced, wondering if there was any possibility she could help. "You used to work in financial analysis?" Marcus repeated, not entirely convinced. Clara nodded, glancing up at him briefly. "Yes. I used to work for a firm that did cybersecurity and financial consulting. It was a big part of what I did before." She trailed off, her voice becoming distant for a brief moment. "Things changed, but I never stopped paying attention to the numbers." Her words hung in the air. Marcus had heard similar things from others, but there was something in her delivery that felt different. Clara didn't seem like someone looking for pity. She wasn't trying to impress him. She was just stating facts. Without really thinking, Marcus asked, "What do you think happened?" Clara hesitated for only a second before responding. "The patterns on your screen aren't just glitches," she said. "They're indicators of a breach. Someone's inside your system, deleting files as they go. This isn't random. Someone is stealing your data." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. A wave of dread washed over him as he tried to grasp what she was saying. His best security experts hadn't figured this out yet. And now this cleaning lady who barely knew the ins and outs of his company had just made a spot-on diagnosis. "You're telling me someone's hacked into my system?" Marcus asked, disbelief creeping into his voice. Clara met his eyes, her gaze steady and calm. "Yes, and if you don't act fast, they could destroy everything. I've seen this kind of thing before." Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came out. The weight of what Clara had just said hit him harder than any of the failed attempts by his security team. She wasn't just another person giving him vague platitudes. She was offering something concrete, something that could save him. "Why should I trust you?" he asked, his voice tight. Clara didn't flinch. She didn't take offense. She just answered, her tone still measured. "You have nothing to lose." There was truth in her words. For a moment, Marcus just stared at her, the silence thick with unspoken questions. His company was dying, and he was willing to listen to anyone who might be able to offer him a way out, even if that person had no business being here. He looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time. She wasn't just the cleaner. She wasn't just a nameless face in a gray uniform. There was something more to her, a quiet confidence, an intelligence that Marcus had missed entirely. "You can help me?" he asked, his voice a little softer now, his skepticism waning. Clara nodded. "I can try, but I'll need full access to your systems to do it properly." Marcus hesitated for a moment. His pride flared up. He was a billionaire, after all. He had a team of highly paid experts, but none of them had figured this out, and Clara had just hit the nail on the head. With a deep breath, he pulled out his access card and handed it to her. "You have access to everything. Don't make me regret this." Clara's eyes flicked to the card, then back to him, and for the first time that evening, Marcus saw a small flicker of determination in her gaze. "I won't," she promised. Together, they walked down to the heart of Horizon Innovations, the server room that held the keys to the company's survival. It was cold down there, and the hum of machines filled the air, a reminder that, for all his wealth, Marcus was powerless without the right people. And in that moment, Clara was the right person. As she sat down at the computer and began to type, Marcus watched in silence. Every keystroke was deliberate, every movement sure. He couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. This woman, the one he'd barely noticed just hours ago, was the one who might save his company. He leaned against the wall, trying to make sense of everything. How had he missed this? How had he overlooked someone who could have helped him all along? For the first time in hours, Marcus felt a small spark of hope. And then, in the quiet of the server room, Clara looked up from her work. Her lips curved into a small smile. "We're going to fix this," she said. "But it's going to take time. You're going to have to trust me completely." Marcus nodded, a small but genuine smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I'm all in," he said. For the first time in a long while, Marcus didn't feel alone. The chaos of the past few days weighed heavily on Marcus. He sat at his desk, the flickering screens of his office reflecting his growing unease. Horizon Innovations, the company he had worked day and night to build, was unraveling before him. Every decision he made seemed to make things worse, and every phone call from his team brought more bad news. The crisis had deepened in ways he hadn't anticipated. As the cyber attack continued to wreak havoc on their systems, new complications surfaced. Rumors circulated about a possible insider threat, someone from within the company who might have been complicit in the attack. Marcus had dismissed it at first. How could someone so close to him be a traitor? But as time passed, the thought gnawed at him, leaving a sinking feeling in his stomach. The worst part? No one, none of the experts he'd hired over the years, could provide answers. His head of security was still scrambling to contain the damage, his top analysts were out of their depth, and his legal team was unsure how to handle the mounting pressure from investors. Every department was paralyzed, and Marcus's frustration grew. He paced the office, staring at the piles of reports and failed attempts to fix the problem. His company wasn't just facing an external attack anymore. It was imploding from the inside. And worse, Marcus couldn't bring himself to admit it. It was hard to swallow his pride, but he couldn't shake the thought that perhaps he had missed something important, something that could have been caught if he'd listened more closely to the people around him. His gut twisted with guilt. The weight of the responsibility was overwhelming. And then, just as the silence in his office became too much to bear, there was a knock at the door. "Mr. Williams?" Clara's voice came through the crack, soft but clear. He didn't want to be interrupted, but part of him also recognized that he wasn't going to get anywhere by isolating himself. He gestured for her to come in. Clara entered with her usual quiet efficiency, pushing her cleaning cart before her. Her presence, as ordinary as it seemed, was oddly comforting in that moment. She didn't ask about his mood or make any attempts to soothe him with empty words. Clara simply went about her task of tidying up, but Marcus noticed she kept glancing at the screens behind him. He tried to focus on the reports in front of him, but the idea that Clara might see something he missed tugged at his mind. "What do you see?" he asked, his voice sharper than he intended. Clara paused, considering him for a moment. I've been watching the screens for a while now, she said, her tone calm but thoughtful. It's bad, but you already know that. The thing is, you're looking at it wrong. Marcus shot her a surprised glance. What do you mean? I know you're trying to fix the attack, but you're not looking at the bigger picture, Clara said, her voice steady. You're thinking in terms of data loss and system recovery, but you're not accounting for the possibility that someone inside your company helped make this happen. The words hit Marcus harder than he expected. He had suspected as much, but hearing it out loud, especially from someone who had never been a part of the company's inner circle, made it feel more real. You think there's an insider involved? He asked, a mix of disbelief and dread in his voice. Clara nodded. It's the only thing that makes sense. The attack was too sophisticated to be random, and it's happening too close to home. Someone inside your company knew exactly where to strike. Marcus felt his stomach churn. He had trusted everyone around him, including his closest colleagues and business partners. To think one of them might be orchestrating his downfall felt like a betrayal too deep to comprehend. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. But who? Who could it be? Everyone here is loyal. I thought they were. I'm not sure yet, Clara said, but I know how to find out. Marcus looked at her, skeptical but also desperate. How? You're not even... I used to be a consultant, remember? Clara interrupted, her eyes not leaving the screens. I may be cleaning offices now, but I still know how to look at numbers, at data. And the first thing you need to do is stop thinking like a CEO. Start thinking like a detective. Marcus stared at her for a long moment. The idea of trusting her, especially in such an intimate, high-stakes situation, was uncomfortable. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized he had nothing left to lose. The people he had relied on had failed him, and Clara, this woman he had barely acknowledged before, was the only one who seemed to be making sense. What do you need? He asked, his voice tinged with frustration. Clara didn't waste time. She immediately began walking him through the steps he needed to take. You need to look at who's been accessing the most sensitive files, the ones related to the attack. Find out who had the passwords, who had the clearance. It won't be easy to track, but it's the first place to start. Marcus opened a drawer and pulled out a file he had almost forgotten about, an audit report that had come through his email days ago. He handed it to Clara. She skimmed through it for a moment before pointing to a few lines on the page. Here. This is the kind of data someone on the inside would have access to. Marcus frowned. You think one of my people had this kind of clearance? Clara's eyes met his, and her voice dropped a notch, soft but firm. Yes. And if you don't act fast, you'll lose everything. But you've been too focused on what's happening right now. You need to dig deeper. Look at your team's actions in the weeks leading up to the attack. A cold chill ran through Marcus as he realized the depth of what Clara was suggesting. If someone from his team had been involved, it could be anyone, a colleague he trusted, someone he'd called a friend. The idea felt like a punch in the gut. He had never considered it, too blind to see it, too proud to think that anyone could betray him. Clara continued, offering a more methodical approach to his company's data analysis. With her guidance, he began to see the pattern. The attack had been too calculated. It wasn't just a random hack. It had been planned, perhaps even months in advance. But how do we even begin to trust this? Marcus muttered, doubting everything. If I find out one of my closest allies is behind this... Clara paused. It won't be easy. But you'll have to trust me, Marcus. I know this business. I know how to read people, and I know how to read data. Trust me on this. Reluctantly, Marcus agreed. For the first time in days, he felt a glimmer of hope. Clara's approach was different from anyone else's. She wasn't just looking at the surface. She was digging into the real issues, uncovering things no one else had noticed. As they worked together through the night, Marcus realized something important. Clara wasn't just a cleaner. She was someone who had seen more than he ever expected, someone who had been overlooked and underestimated, but who held the key to saving everything he had worked for. As Marcus and Clara continued to sift through the evidence, they unearthed a web of deceit that shook Marcus to his core. What started as a simple investigation into his company's troubles was rapidly turning into something much darker. And with every passing hour, the truth about who had betrayed him and why began to reveal itself. The next few days felt like they passed in a haze. Marcus couldn't shake the weight of Clara's words. Someone inside the company had been complicit in the attack. He had spent years building this company, and now the very people he trusted were the ones who might bring it to its knees. But what choice did he have? With Clara's help, he began to sift through the company's financial records, employee access logs, and internal communications. It was a painstaking process, and the more they dug, the more Marcus began to see the signs of a deeper conspiracy, something he hadn't been willing to acknowledge. Clara's insight was invaluable. As they reviewed the data, she pointed out anomalies that Marcus's experts had missed. Access logs from the days leading up to the attack were suspicious. There were gaps, unexplained times when certain high-level executives had access to sensitive systems when they shouldn't have. Small discrepancies in financial reports seemed to hint at deliberate tampering. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing, Clara said one evening, her voice steady as she studied a particular spreadsheet. This wasn't a random attack. This was someone who understood the company's weaknesses inside and out. Marcus leaned over the desk, staring at the numbers in front of him. His head throbbed from the constant pressure, but Clara's calm, methodical approach kept him focused. She was right. It wasn't just the attack that was devastating. It was the realization that someone he had trusted might have been orchestrating the entire thing. Clara continued to dig, her fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. "We need to look at who had access to these systems," she said, pointing to a line of code that Marcus hadn't fully understood. "Who could have done this?" "Tom," Marcus muttered, the name slipping from his lips before he could stop it. Tom Reed, his business partner. Tom had been with him from the beginning, when Horizon Innovations was just an idea on a napkin, when the sleepless nights and endless meetings had turned into something real. He was more than just an investor. He was a friend, someone Marcus had relied on, trusted implicitly. But now, as the pieces began to fall into place, Marcus couldn't ignore the gnawing suspicion that Tom might have been involved. It didn't make sense, but Clara had shown him the facts. They were hard to ignore. "Clara, could it be him?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tom's been here from the start. He's like family to me." Clara looked up from the screen, her expression unreadable. "I don't know yet. But the evidence points to someone in a position of power, someone who could manipulate the numbers, access sensitive data, and cover their tracks. Tom fits that profile." Marcus felt like the air had been knocked out of him. The thought of Tom, his partner, betraying him was impossible to comprehend. But Clara's calmness, the way she broke down the data, made it hard to deny. She wasn't jumping to conclusions. She was laying out the facts. "Do you think he's been using his position to siphon off money?" Marcus asked, his mind reeling. "Has he been embezzling from the company?" Clara nodded. "It's possible. I've seen these kinds of things before. People who have too much access and too much trust can hide a lot." Marcus slammed his fist on the desk. "How could I have been so blind?" The anger bubbled up inside him, a mix of rage and disbelief. He had built this company with Tom. They had shared successes, failures, and everything in between. Now, it seemed like everything had been a lie. Clara's voice cut through the tension. "We can't jump to conclusions, but we need to act quickly. If Tom is involved, he's not going to let this go without a fight. We need to confront him with the evidence." The thought of confronting Tom made Marcus's stomach twist. How could he confront the man who had been his partner, his friend, and his ally for so many years? How could he accuse him of something like this? But Clara was right. He had to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. Horizon Innovations was on the line, and Marcus couldn't let his own pride stop him from doing what was necessary. The next morning, Marcus called Tom to meet. It was a quiet, tense meeting in the boardroom, just the two of them. Tom arrived, his usual confident smile in place, but there was something different about him today. The usual warmth in his eyes seemed absent, replaced by a coldness that Marcus couldn't ignore. "Marcus, what's going on?" Tom asked as he sat down across from him. "You sounded urgent on the phone." Marcus didn't waste time. He slid the stack of papers across the table, the evidence of the discrepancies, the missing funds, the unauthorized access. "We've been looking into the attack, Tom, and I think you know why you're here." Tom's eyes flickered to the papers, then back to Marcus, a flash of something. Anger? Guilt in his expression. He took a deep breath. "Marcus, I don't know what you're talking about. What are you implying?" "I'm implying," Marcus said, his voice low but firm, "that you've been stealing from the company. You've been siphoning money, manipulating the data, and now I'm being told you've had a hand in this attack." Tom's face reddened, but he didn't say anything immediately. His hands fidgeted with the edges of his suit jacket, something Marcus had never seen him do before. "Tom," Marcus pressed, his voice rising now, "you've been with me since the beginning. I trusted you. But now I have evidence that points directly to you." Tom's expression hardened, his jaw clenching. For a moment, the man who had been his partner, his confidant, seemed like a stranger. "You don't understand, Marcus," Tom finally said, his voice tight. "This company was never really yours. You were always the face, the showman. I kept the wheels turning. I made things happen behind the scenes. Without me, Horizon Innovations would have fallen apart long ago." Marcus felt a sickening wave of realization. So, this was about control, about power. "You've been using me, haven't you?" Tom didn't deny it. "I've been doing what I needed to do. You were too busy with your shiny idea of what Horizon could be. Someone had to keep the company alive when you couldn't see past your own ego." The words struck Marcus like a punch to the gut. All these years, everything they had built together, and Tom had been playing him. Marcus had trusted him with everything, and Tom had taken it all, his trust, his company, his future, and used it to his advantage. "You've been stealing from us," Marcus said, his voice shaking with fury. "I never thought you could do this. You were my friend." "I did what I had to do," Tom retorted, his voice cold now. "The world doesn't care about your ideals, Marcus. It's about survival. And now you're just a part of my plan." The anger burned through Marcus. He could feel the fire in his chest, but he wasn't going to let it consume him. He had to act, had to make sure Tom paid for what he'd done. "We're done, Tom," Marcus said, his voice steady, despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. "I'll make sure you're arrested. You'll never see a cent from this company again." Tom stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly across the floor. "You're making a mistake," he spat, his eyes flashing with something dangerous. "You'll regret this." But Marcus didn't flinch. He had no choice. Tom had crossed a line, and there was no going back. As Tom stormed out, Clara stepped into the room, her presence a quiet comfort. Marcus looked at her, his face pale. "It's done. He's out." Clara nodded. "Good. You did the right thing. Now we can move forward." Marcus took a deep breath, the weight of the betrayal still heavy in his chest. But as Clara stood beside him, he knew that he wasn't alone anymore. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but together they could rebuild Horizon Innovations from the ground up. With Tom out of the picture, Marcus and Clara began to rebuild not just the company, but their own understanding of trust, power, and what it truly meant to lead. But the work was far from over. The damage was done. but they were determined to fight for the future of Horizon Innovations and to redefine what success really meant. The aftermath of the confrontation with Tom left Marcus feeling raw and exposed. For years, he had been convinced that his company, Horizon Innovations, was a well-oiled machine. It had been his creation, his vision. He had built it from the ground up, and every success had been his. At least, that's how he had always seen it. But the events of the past week had shattered that illusion, piece by piece. Tom's betrayal wasn't just personal. It was a blow to everything Marcus had built. He'd been blind to the very people who had been in the trenches with him. Now, everything felt different. The weight of his decisions, of his blind trust, was heavy on his shoulders. Marcus stood by the large windows of his office, looking out at the city below. The skyline, which had once felt like a symbol of everything he had achieved, now felt distant and cold. He had spent so much time looking outward, at the growth, the profits, the success, that he had forgotten to look inward, at the people who truly made it all possible. As the days passed, the company slowly began to stabilize. The immediate threat of the cyber attack had been mitigated, and the internal chaos left by Tom's embezzlement was starting to clear. But the recovery process was far from over. Marcus knew that Horizon Innovations wouldn't just bounce back on its own. It needed a new foundation, a foundation built on trust, accountability, and transparency. It was in the midst of this crisis that Marcus began to see Clara in a new light. The woman who had been cleaning his office just days ago was now the very person who had saved his company. She had been the one to uncover Tom's betrayal, the one who had calmly guided him through the worst of it, and the one who had been by his side when everything seemed to fall apart. Clara's impact on the company went beyond just the technical fixes. She had brought a fresh perspective, a calmness that Marcus hadn't realized he had needed until now. Her ability to see past the surface and focus on what truly mattered was something he had never experienced in his circle of high-priced consultants and advisors. And it wasn't just her expertise in financial analysis or data security that impressed him. It was the way she carried herself, her quiet strength, her unshakable confidence. Clara wasn't just a problem solver. She was a leader in her own right. One evening, as they sat together in his office after another long day of strategizing, Marcus made a decision. He had already begun the process of cleaning up Horizon Innovations, rebuilding trust with investors, and restructuring the leadership team. But he knew that the heart of the company, the beating core, needed someone like Clara. He couldn't keep ignoring the truth. She wasn't just an outsider anymore. "You know," Marcus said, breaking the silence, "I've been thinking a lot about how we move forward, about what this company really needs." Clara looked up from her notes, her brow furrowed slightly. "What do you mean?" Marcus hesitated for a moment. He had thought about this for days, but now that the words were finally about to leave his mouth, it felt like an impossible decision. He knew that Clara had helped him more than anyone else had in the past few years, maybe in his whole career. "I mean that I've been looking at things all wrong. I've had the wrong people in the wrong places, focusing on the wrong priorities," he said, his voice steady but filled with the weight of his realization. "I've built a company, but I've never really built a team. A real team. Not just people I pay to do their jobs, but people I trust. People who are as invested in this company's future as I am." Clara tilted her head, watching him with an intensity that made him feel like she was seeing right through him. "And you think you found that in me?" she asked, her voice calm but not without a hint of surprise. Marcus met her eyes and nodded. "I do. Clara, you've shown me more in the last week than anyone else ever has. You didn't just fix the company's financials. You helped me see what was missing, what I've been too blind to notice for years. You've got more to offer than I could have imagined when I first met you." Clara's expression softened, but there was a hesitation in her eyes. "Marcus, I'm not here to take over. I'm just trying to help, to fix what's broken." "I know, but that's exactly why I'm offering you a real role in the company. You've got the skills. You've got the vision. You've already proven yourself in ways no one else has. So I'm asking you, formally now, not as a favor but as a real offer, would you consider coming on board full-time as part of the leadership team? Clara's face was unreadable for a long moment. She looked at him as if weighing the decision in her mind, as if trying to reconcile her own feelings with the reality of the situation. "I don't know," she said finally, her voice almost a whisper. "I've never been part of something like this before. I've spent so much time being invisible, just doing the work and staying out of the spotlight. It's hard to think about stepping into a role that's so different." Marcus leaned forward, his gaze intense but understanding. "I get it. You've spent your whole life being overlooked. I'm asking you to take a chance. On me, on the company, and on yourself. You deserve more than just being someone who cleans the office. You've already saved this company. Now I'm asking you to help me lead it." Clara looked down at her hands for a moment, as if considering his words carefully. She had spent the last few years hiding in the shadows, taking whatever work came her way just to make ends meet. But she had never stopped being brilliant. And Marcus was offering her a chance to step out of that shadow, to be recognized for what she truly was, a leader. "I'll think about it," she said quietly. "But if I agree, I'm not doing it for the title. I'm doing it because I believe in this company. I believe in the people here, and I believe in you. But I'm not here to play games. I'm here to fix what's broken." Marcus smiled, a weight lifting from his chest. He could see it in her eyes. She was ready. And for the first time in a long while, Marcus felt like he was making the right choice. As Clara began to settle into her new role, she brought more than just her financial expertise. She brought a sense of purpose, of integrity, that Marcus had been missing for far too long. Horizon Innovations was on its way to recovery, but with Clara's guidance, they would rebuild stronger than ever, on a foundation built on trust, transparency, and a shared vision for the future. The first few weeks after Clara's official role in Horizon Innovations were a blur for Marcus. Everything had shifted. The chaos of the past month had not only rattled the company, but it had shaken Marcus to his core. The changes were not just business-related, they were personal. He had never imagined that his company's survival would hinge on someone like Clara, someone who had been invisible to him for so long, but who now seemed to hold all the answers. Clara's calm efficiency in the face of crisis became the backbone of Horizon's recovery. The leadership team Marcus had once trusted, those same executives he had cultivated relationships with over the years, were either too paralyzed by the crisis or unwilling to take the kind of hard action that was necessary. But Clara, she was different. She didn't waste time on the politics or the hesitation. She got straight to the heart of the matter. Under her guidance, the company's finances began to take shape again. Clara had implemented a new financial strategy that was straightforward, but effective. The first task was to cut out the dead weight, old investments that weren't providing any returns, outdated technology that needed upgrading, and financial practices that were draining the company's resources. With each change, Marcus felt the weight on his shoulders lighten. His company, though battered, was starting to breathe again. But it wasn't just the numbers that Clara helped Marcus navigate. She helped him see things about his own leadership style that he had never been willing to face before. Marcus had spent so much time focusing on what the company could do for him, its growth, its profits, that he had never truly invested in his people. The boardroom meetings, the long nights, the endless strategic plans, all of it had revolved around one thing: his own ambition. It had taken a crisis for Marcus to realize that ambition alone wasn't enough. True success didn't come from wealth or status, but from the relationships you built along the way. As Marcus sat in the new boardroom, one that had been revamped with Clara's influence, designed for transparency and open communication, he looked around at the faces of the new team he was working with. These weren't just hired hands. These were people he had come to trust, to depend on. And Clara, sitting at the head of the table, was no longer just the woman who had saved the company. She was an equal. "What's next?" Marcus asked, his eyes meeting Clara's as he took his seat. He had been asking that question a lot lately. In a sense, it felt like they were starting from scratch. But the difference now was that he felt grounded, supported by Clara and the new team he was building. Clara leaned forward, a subtle smile playing at the edges of her lips. "Next, we rebuild trust, with our investors, with our clients, and with ourselves. We have a long road ahead, but I believe we can do it. We just need to stick to our values." Marcus nodded. It was a simple statement, but one that resonated with him. For so long, he had ignored the values that had originally driven him to start the company. Now, those values were all that mattered. As the meeting continued, Clara mapped out the next steps. Horizon Innovations would be making some bold moves, cutting-edge technology investments, new hiring strategies, and even plans for an ambitious new product launch that would put them back on the map. But none of this would work without one thing: trust. Trust in each other. Trust in the company's mission. Trust that the future could be brighter than the past. The weeks that followed were marked by hard work, late nights, and relentless problem-solving. But there was something different now. The atmosphere had shifted. The air was filled with possibility. Marcus had always been the one at the top, making all the decisions, charting the course. But now, he realized that he wasn't alone anymore. He wasn't the only one steering the ship. Clara, once a cleaner in his office, was now the company's unofficial lifeblood. She had guided him through the worst crisis Horizon Innovations had ever faced, and now she was helping him rebuild the company on a foundation that was built to last. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It wasn't about the products or the growth. It was about making things right, fixing what had been broken, both in the company and in Marcus himself. And for the first time, Marcus understood that it wasn't enough to fix the company on the outside. He had to rebuild from within. Clara's influence didn't just end at the financials. As the days passed, Marcus began to understand the true power of a leader who leads with humility and integrity. He watched Clara work alongside his team, not as a boss, but as someone who was genuinely invested in their success. She wasn't trying to outshine anyone. She wasn't looking for accolades. She was simply doing the work. And that work, in the end, spoke for itself. Clara's presence was slowly changing Horizon Innovations. Employees who had once been disconnected from the mission were starting to believe in it again. Clients who had once questioned the company's viability were now showing interest in new partnerships. Investors, once skeptical, were beginning to see the strength in the company's new direction. And through all of it, Marcus was changing too. He had learned the hard way that success wasn't just about the numbers. It was about the people, the ones you lead and the ones you trust. Clara had shown him that. She had shown him that leadership wasn't about taking the credit, but about lifting others up and about facing the hard truths when they came. As Horizon Innovations began to stabilize, Marcus also began to make changes in his personal life. In the past, he had been distant from everyone, his family, his friends, and even his employees. The only thing that mattered to him was the company. But now, he started to reconnect with the people who had always been there for him. It was strange, this new sense of humility that had begun to shape him. The man who had once prided himself on his success, his control, was now learning to listen, to value the input of others. He reached out to family members he hadn't spoken to in years. He began to understand the importance of balance, of taking the time to invest in the people around him, not just the business. It wasn't an easy shift. It required him to let go of his pride, to admit that he had been wrong, to admit that his way wasn't always the best way. But he did it. And with each step forward, Marcus felt the burden lift. As the company slowly recovered, so did Marcus. His relationship with Clara, built on mutual respect, began to evolve in unexpected ways. There was something about the way she worked, the way she approached every problem with calm determination, that drew him to her. He had trusted her with everything, the company, his life, and she had never let him down. In many ways, she had already saved him, not just from a business collapse, but from himself. It wasn't just Marcus who was changing. Clara, too, was transforming. She had come into Horizon Innovations as an outsider, a cleaner with a hidden past. But now, she was an integral part of the company's future. As the financial recovery began to take shape, so did her confidence. She wasn't just a silent partner anymore. She was a leader in her own right. Employees who had once overlooked her now sought her advice. Investors who had been skeptical of her position now respected her ability to turn the company around. Clara had proven that she was more than just a woman in a gray uniform. She was someone whose value couldn't be measured by the job title she had once held. She was a force in the company, someone who had brought the company back from the brink and who had helped redefine what success really meant. For the first time in years, Clara felt seen, and that feeling was everything. As Horizon Innovations began to thrive, the challenges didn't end. The road ahead was still filled with obstacles, old rivals, new competitors, and internal struggles. But Marcus, Clara, and the team had something the company hadn't had in a long time, a solid foundation. And with that, they were ready for whatever came next. As Horizon Innovations began to stabilize, Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in what they had accomplished. The company, once teetering on the edge of collapse, was now starting to rise again. Clara's leadership and financial acumen had been invaluable, and Marcus knew they were on the right path. Investors were beginning to show interest again, and some long-lost clients were starting to call, intrigued by the company's recovery and new direction. But with success came challenges, and Marcus was finding that the price of success was higher than he had ever imagined. The boardroom meetings had become more frequent, and the pressure was mounting. The investors who had been cautious were now demanding results, pushing for higher returns on their investments. Competitors, once on the sidelines, had started to take notice of Horizon's recovery, and some were even starting to challenge their market position. Marcus had known this would happen, but the intensity of the scrutiny still caught him off guard. And then there were the old demons, the people from his past who had always been there, lurking in the background, waiting for a chance to knock him down again. He was sitting in his office one afternoon when he received an unexpected call from an old friend, or more accurately, an old rival. "Marcus," the voice on the other end of the line said, "it's been a while. How's the company doing these days?" Marcus tensed at the sound of Jameson Pierce's voice. Jameson had been one of his closest business associates in the early days of Horizon Innovations, a man he had trusted. But somewhere along the way, Jameson's ambitions had led him down a darker path, one that had ultimately driven them apart. The man was a snake in a suit, charming on the outside but dangerous beneath the surface. "It's going well," Marcus replied cautiously, trying to keep his tone neutral. "We're on the upswing." "Yeah, I've heard," Jameson said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Impressive, really. I didn't think you had it in you after the mess you made. But I suppose a guy like you always figures it out, right?" Marcus clenched his jaw, but he kept his voice steady. "What do you want?" "Jameson." There was a pause on the other end of the line before Jameson spoke again, his tone more serious now. "I hear you're looking to expand, maybe even considering a buyout offer. If you're serious, I might have a proposal for you. It's something you should think about, Marcus. Your company's value is high right now, but it won't stay that way forever. This is the moment to cash in." Marcus felt a surge of anger rise within him. He had known Jameson well enough to recognize what was happening. Jameson was trying to buy Horizon Innovations on the cheap, now that it was back on the rise. He wanted to swoop in, take advantage of Marcus's vulnerability, and seize control of the company he had worked so hard to rebuild. "I'm not interested in selling," Marcus said firmly, though the temptation to take the easy way out lingered in the back of his mind. Jameson chuckled, the sound mocking. Of course you're not. But let's be honest, Marcus. This is business. You've fought hard to keep the company afloat, but you're not a fool. You know how this game works. There's no shame in stepping aside and cashing out while the getting's good. Marcus's grip on the phone tightened. I'm not selling. You're wasting your time. I think you're making a mistake. Jameson's voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. But we both know what happens when people get too proud to let go. You've got a lot riding on this company. Don't make the mistake of thinking you can do it alone. You'll need someone with experience to get you through the next stage. Before Marcus could respond, Jameson hung up, leaving him in the eerie silence of his office. The call had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. He knew that selling the company was an option, but it wasn't one he was willing to entertain. Not yet, at least. The idea of giving up control, of letting someone like Jameson take over, felt like defeat. Horizon Innovations was his creation, and he wasn't ready to let it go, not when they were just starting to rebuild. But Jameson's words stuck with him. You'll need someone with experience. Marcus turned to look at the city skyline through his office window. The pressure was mounting, and the stakes had never been higher. He could feel the weight of the decisions he was about to make, and he wasn't sure if he was prepared for the cost of success. As the days passed, Marcus found himself facing more and more challenges from old colleagues and competitors. People who had once supported him in the early stages of Horizon's growth now saw an opportunity to swoop in and claim their share of the company's newfound success. They weren't just offering advice, they were offering solutions that came at a price. His former CFO, a man named Darren Hayes, called him one afternoon with a proposal. Marcus, I'm hearing whispers. Investors are nervous. They're questioning your leadership. You've got to make some serious changes if you want to keep them on board. Darren had been with Marcus from the beginning, but his role had become less and less defined over the years. He had been a part of the old guard, the people who had helped Marcus build Horizon. But now that things were turning around, Darren's advice didn't hold the same weight. He was just another voice in the crowd, trying to find a way to make himself relevant again. I've got it covered, Darren, Marcus replied, his voice tight. I don't need your help. But Darren wasn't backing down. I'm telling you, Marcus, you can't do this on your own. There's a reason why people like Jameson succeed. They know how to play the game. You're in over your head, and you're too proud to admit it. Marcus's jaw clenched as Darren's words echoed in his mind. Pride. It was something he had always struggled with. But this time, he wasn't going to let it make his decisions for him. He had come too far, and he had Clara by his side. They had worked too hard to let people like Jameson and Darren tear everything down. I'm not selling, Marcus said, his voice unwavering. And I'm not backing down. I know exactly what I'm doing. Through all of this, Clara remained a steady presence. She wasn't involved in the political battles or the external pressures. Instead, she kept her focus on what mattered, rebuilding Horizon Innovations from the inside out. She had grown into her new role, her influence continuing to expand, but never in a way that felt overwhelming. She had earned the respect of everyone in the company, not through flashy displays or grand gestures, but through her consistent, calm approach. She had proven that she was not just capable of fixing the company's finances, she was capable of leading it into the future. One evening, after a particularly tough board meeting, Clara and Marcus sat together in the office, reviewing the latest data. The stress of the past few weeks had taken a toll on both of them, but Clara remained as calm as ever. I know you're under a lot of pressure, she said quietly, her voice soft but firm. But don't let these people, these old voices, distract you from what you've built. They don't get it. They don't understand what we're trying to do here. Marcus looked at her, the weight of his doubts and fears easing slightly in her presence. I know, but sometimes I feel like I'm fighting a battle I can't win. The world expects me to sell, to let go, and I'm not sure I can keep up with the demands. Clara reached out, placing a hand on his. You don't have to do it alone anymore, Marcus. You've got me. You've got this team. We're in this together. The only way forward is to trust the people who believe in you. Marcus felt something inside him shift. He wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to prove everything to the world. Maybe the only thing that mattered was staying true to what he had built, and to the people who had helped him get there. As Marcus and Clara continued to strengthen their resolve, the pressure of the decision ahead grew. The buyout offer loomed, tempting him with promises of an easy way out. But Marcus knew he had to make a choice that would define not just the future of Horizon Innovations, but the man he was becoming. The moment of truth was approaching, and it was one he could no longer avoid. Marcus stood in his office, staring at the email that had been sitting in his inbox for days now. The subject line was simple, yet the words felt like they carried the weight of his entire future. Buyout offer. Horizon Innovations. He had known this moment was coming. After all, it was a typical move in the world of business. A successful recovery, an appealing company, and the vultures, old rivals, investors, and corporations, were circling. The offer on the table was more than tempting. The price tag was high enough to make any businessman pause and think about what his next move should be. But for Marcus, the decision felt like more than just business. It was personal. The decision was even harder with Jameson Pierce's voice still echoing in his mind. You'll need someone with experience. For the first time in months, Marcus found himself questioning everything. The company, Horizon Innovations, had become his life. But had it also become his prison? The offer would free him from the relentless pressure, the constant demands, all the years of stress, the sleepless nights, the endless decisions. It could all be over with a signature. But at what cost? He glanced at the chair where Clara always sat during their meetings. She wasn't there now, but he could almost feel her presence beside him. Clara had been the one to guide him through the darkest moments. She had taught him to see beyond the numbers, to recognize the human element in business. And, if he were being honest, she had helped him see what was truly important, not just in business, but in life. The idea of selling was a difficult one, especially when it meant letting go of the very thing he had fought so hard to build. But Clara had made it clear that success wasn't just about the money. It was about the people who believed in you. And more importantly, it was about the values that defined your company. Marcus opened the email once more, reading the terms. The money was enormous, enough to make him one of the wealthiest men in the country. The buyer, a larger tech conglomerate, promised to honor the legacy of Horizon Innovations, but Marcus knew better than to believe in corporate promises. It was the kind of deal that would secure his financial future for generations. Yet something in his gut twisted as he thought about what it would mean for the people who had helped him build Horizon, from the ground up to its hard-won recovery. His thoughts wandered to Clara, to the company's employees, to the future he had started to imagine, one where success wasn't measured by money alone, but by the people you trusted and the legacy you built together. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Marcus?" Clara's voice called softly through the crack. She entered without waiting for a response, her eyes immediately settling on the email on his screen. "You're still thinking about it, aren't you?" Marcus turned the screen away, his shoulders sagging. "Yeah, it's hard not to. The offer's too good to ignore. But I can't shake this feeling that it's not what I want. Not anymore." Clara walked in and sat across from him, her gaze steady as she looked him over. "I know it's tempting, but you're not that guy anymore, Marcus. You've built something with real value here. And I'm not talking about the financials. I'm talking about the culture, the people. Selling would mean losing that, and you've worked too hard to build it." Marcus met her eyes, the truth in her words resonating deeply. "You're right. But there's this part of me, the part that's always been about control and success, that keeps telling me it's the smart move. Take the money, walk away. Let someone else handle the future. Clara leaned forward, her voice unwavering. You're not just a businessman anymore. You've learned that. You've grown, Marcus. This isn't just about the company. It's about what kind of man you want to be. Do you want to sell out and let someone else take the reins, or do you want to fight for what you believe in? You've been given a second chance. Don't let it slip away. Her words hit him harder than he expected. The room felt heavier now, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. It wasn't just about Horizon Innovations anymore. It was about his future, his integrity, and the life he wanted to lead. He thought back to everything Clara had taught him over the past few months. She had shown him that real leadership wasn't about making money. It was about making a difference, creating something that lasted. You know, Marcus said slowly, the realization dawning on him. I've been running from this moment, from the pressure, from the idea of losing everything I've worked for. But maybe it's not about the fear of failure. Maybe it's about the fear of success without purpose. Clara smiled, a small but proud smile. Exactly. Marcus sat back in his chair, the weight of the decision finally lifting. He knew what he had to do. He wasn't going to sell. Not now. Not when they were so close to something real. He wasn't going to let the world dictate his future. Not again. He took a deep breath and reached for the phone. He dialed the number for the buyer. As the phone rang, Marcus's heart pounded. This was the moment where he would decide his fate and Horizon's fate for the rest of his life. Mr. Williams, a voice on the other end of the line answered after a few rings. Are you ready to move forward? Marcus paused, staring at the screen before him. He thought of Clara, of the team that had stood by him, of the company they were rebuilding from the ground up. I've made my decision, he said, his voice firm. I'm not interested in selling. Horizon Innovations isn't for sale. There was a pause on the other end of the line, the buyer's voice sounding slightly taken aback. Are you sure about that, Mr. Williams? You realize what you're turning down? I know exactly what I'm turning down, Marcus replied. But what I'm keeping is more valuable than money. This company, the people in it, and what we're building, this is what matters. Understood, the voice said, cold but professional. I'll take note of your decision. Marcus ended the call, his hands trembling slightly as he set the phone down on the desk. He looked at Clara, who was watching him with an almost knowing expression. Well, Marcus said with a sigh, his voice a mix of relief and uncertainty, I guess it's official. We're in this for the long haul. Clara's smile grew wider. I knew you'd make the right choice. For the first time in a long time, Marcus felt a sense of peace. He had made the decision that felt right, not because it was the easy path, but because it was the one that aligned with his values. As Horizon Innovations moved forward, Marcus and Clara faced new challenges, ones that would test their resolve and their commitment to the company's mission. But with the right foundation in place and a shared vision for the future, they knew that the horizon was brighter than ever. It had been a year since Marcus made the decision that would change everything. He had turned down the buyout offer, the temptation of quick wealth, and chose to keep Horizon Innovations in his hands. At the time, it had felt like a risk, maybe even a foolish one. But now, as he sat in his office overlooking the city, Marcus knew it had been the right choice. The company was stronger than ever. They had weathered the storm of the cyber attack, the betrayal from within, and the pressure from investors and competitors. But now, Horizon Innovations wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Clara, who had once been a stranger in a cleaning uniform, now sat across from him as an equal, a business partner he could trust without question. Together, they had built something extraordinary. Clara had taken the financial helm, transforming the company's approach to business, and it was paying off in ways Marcus could have only dreamed of. The transformation wasn't just financial. Horizon Innovations was no longer just a tech company. It had become a place where people mattered, not just the bottom line. There was a culture of trust, transparency, and respect that had permeated every level of the company. Employees who once felt invisible were now given opportunities to lead. Clients who had once turned away from Horizon, skeptical of its future, were now lining up at the door to be part of its success. But perhaps the most significant change of all was the one Marcus had undergone. He had gone from a man who measured success in numbers and accolades to someone who understood that true success wasn't just about what you built, but who you built it with. He had learned to let go of his pride, to listen, and to recognize that strength didn't come from doing everything alone. As Marcus sat in the boardroom, looking at the faces of the new team he had assembled, he realized just how much things had changed. Clara was now sitting at the table as one of the company's key leaders. Her role had evolved from financial analyst to one of the most respected voices in the room. The trust and admiration that had grown between them were evident in every decision they made, every strategy they devised. "Clara, I have to admit," Marcus said with a grin, looking at her across the table, "I never thought we'd be here. Not like this." Clara's smile was small but genuine. "I didn't think you'd be the one asking for advice either," she teased, but there was no bitterness in her tone, just camaraderie. Marcus laughed, shaking his head. "I was a fool. I thought I had it all figured out. But I've learned more from you in the past year than I did in the previous decade." Clara gave him a soft look of understanding. "We all have our blind spots, but it's what we do with them that matters." The team gathered around the table nodded in agreement. They weren't just colleagues. They were a collective force, driven by shared values, by the sense that they were all building something greater than themselves. As the meeting went on, Marcus looked out at the skyline again. The city that had once felt so overwhelming, so impersonal, now felt like a place of endless possibility. Horizon Innovations was no longer just a company. It had become a community, a reflection of Marcus's own transformation. Later that evening, after the meeting ended and the office began to quiet down, Marcus and Clara stood by the large windows of the office. The city was bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun, casting long shadows over the streets below. It was a moment of stillness, a time for reflection. "I never could have done this without you, Clara," Marcus said, his voice low but sincere. "You showed me that there's more to success than numbers and deals. It's about the people you surround yourself with, and how you treat them." Clara turned to him, her expression softening. "It wasn't just me, Marcus. It was all of us. We built this together." Marcus nodded, but there was something in his eyes that made Clara pause. He had come so far, but she knew the road hadn't been easy for him. It hadn't been easy for either of them. "You've come a long way," Clara said quietly. "You've changed, Marcus. You see people now, not just the bottom line." "I see that now," Marcus replied, his voice heavy with emotion. "I was so caught up in the idea of winning, of proving myself, that I lost sight of what really mattered. But now I know. Now I get it." Clara smiled gently. "And that's the kind of success that lasts." For a moment, they both stood in silence, watching the city below. It was as if the entire world had shifted, and with it, their place in it. Horizon Innovations had been rebuilt, stronger and more united than ever before. And Marcus had finally learned the most important lesson of all. Success wasn't about the money, the accolades, or the empire you built. It was about the people you trusted, the relationships you cultivated, and the legacy you left behind. As the months passed, the changes at Horizon Innovations continued to ripple outward. The company's growth was nothing short of remarkable. The values that Marcus and Clara had instilled in the company were paying off. Horizon wasn't just a business anymore. It was a model for how companies should operate in a world that often prioritized profits over people. Marcus and Clara's partnership had grown beyond the boardroom. They had become more than just colleagues. They had become equals. They had fought for each other's respect, and in doing so, had forged a bond that neither of them had anticipated. The trust between them was unshakable, and somewhere along the way, Marcus realized that the bond they had formed was more than just professional. There was something deeper there, something neither of them had expected. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about something more profound, more personal. The night before their annual company gala, Marcus found himself in his office, looking at Clara from across the room. The company was doing well, the future was looking bright, and yet something inside him felt incomplete. "Clara," he said softly, "I don't know how to say this, but you've become more than just my business partner. You've become someone I can't imagine my life without. You're my foundation, my balance. You've taught me what real success is." Clara looked at him, her eyes softening with understanding. "I'm not the same person I was when I first walked into this office. You've shown me that I have more to offer than I ever realized." There was a long pause between them. For the first time, Marcus felt like the walls he had built around himself, the walls of pride, of fear, were crumbling. The woman he had once overlooked was now the most important person in his life. "Clara," he said, his voice filled with a quiet confidence, "I want to take this partnership further. Not just in business, but in life." She blinked, her breath catching slightly. "Marcus, what are you saying?" He smiled softly, his heart pounding. "I want to build a future with you. Not just in this company, but in everything." Clara's eyes searched his face, and for a moment, everything else seemed to fade away. She nodded, a slow smile spreading across her face. "I've always believed in second chances. I just didn't realize we were both getting one." As the gala that evening unfolded with laughter, music, and celebration, Marcus and Clara stood side by side, ready to take on whatever came next. Horizon Innovations was more than a company. It was a testament to resilience, to the power of second chances, and to the people who believed in the possibility of change. Looking around at the faces of the people who had helped rebuild the company, Marcus realized that he had found something far more valuable than wealth or status. He had found a new purpose, one that was grounded in trust, integrity, and the belief that true success wasn't measured by what you owned, but by what you gave. Horizon Innovations was a reflection of who they had all become. And as Marcus looked at Clara, standing beside him, he knew that together they had built something that would last far beyond the boardrooms, the investments, or the products they created. It was a legacy of people, and that, he realized, was the greatest success of all.